Ford. Good afternoon, sir.
Oh, good afternoon. And before I start my remarks, I'd like to point out, well, I guess the time is running. I've testified in a lot of locations. The interactive nature, the congeniality, the conversation here is outstanding. My name is Pat Ford. I will argue, first of all, editorially, that the real national security threat lies not in our ability to deliver taxpayer-subsidized specialized services to foreign nations, but our ability to deliver those services to American cities and towns. I will also argue that a lot of the precepts underlying the conversation around federal power is built on a house of sand that started with the Nixon administration. My name is Pat Ford, and I am testifying today in my capacity as a member of the Libertarian National Committee, the Board of Directors of the Libertarian National Party. The Libertarian Party is America's fastest growing political party. A significant portion of the party's growth is directly tied to the presence of Gulf War era veterans who have coalesced nationally around Defend the Guard. As libertarians, we believe that the manner in which we should accord our troops respect should not just be a reflection of thank you for their service, but to rise in protest against engagement in economically driven foreign misadventures, police actions, and proxy wars, which serve to place the brave men and women who serve our nation in mortal danger. This legislation is straightforward: to forbid the federal government from conscription of National Guard troops absent a formal declaration of war. The current approach to overseas military deployment is the enactment of an authorization for use of military force, AUMF, a political dodge that defers ultimate decision-making to the executive branch. By abdicating their responsibility, Congress is refusing to exercise its duty under the U.S. Constitution. It is my belief that this legislation will effectively force the federal government to revert to the constitutionally mandated congressional declaration of war. Additionally, history is replete with examples of National Guard troops serving overseas during times of great tragedy here at home in the United States. Let's talk about Katrina. I would commend to your attention the recently released Netflix Katrina documentary. I would also point out that most recently, with the case of Hurricane Helene, Tennessee followed through on a planned deployment immediately after Hurricane Helene with over 700 troops, all of which I think could be argued that anyone watching the news would understand that needed to be in Tennessee. I'll read from a Defense Department testimony. It has been reported that National Guard units responding to Katrina did not have adequate numbers of tactical radios or high mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles adapted for high water operations because of their deployment in Iraq. Another example noted is that the 101st Air Assault Division, based in nearby Fort Campbell, Kentucky. This division, which has the largest number of transport helicopters of any Army unit, was not deployed to Katrina operations because it's in the process of deploying to Iraq. Opposition to this legislation often focused on the federal funding mechanisms that serve to subsidize state National Guards. I'll quote Arizona Congressman Gosar, and he spoke to this issue directly. Some opponents contend that passage of this bill would potentially threaten the Arizona National Guard's federal funding. This is incorrect. There is nothing in federal law that would eliminate federal funding if Arizona passes the Defend the Guard Act. Nor would Congress pass such legislation. The federal government needs a well-prepared Guard. I pledge that under no circumstance will I allow the existing administration to fund our state's National Guard. Defend the National Guard is an active consideration in excess of 26 states. We urge the passage of this legislation here in Massachusetts, where I live in Rhode Island, because we are, both of us, the birthplace of the American Revolution. I would also respond to the General's concern about the 10th Amendment group. The 10th Amendment group is simply pointing out the constitutional obstacles to this omnipresent executive branch. We see that formally happening today. That power needs to be wheeled back. Does that represent a direct challenge between state authority and federal authority? Yes, it is, but it's based on a constitutional mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
How do we get around the national security? So pushing aside the very large debate we've had thus far about the legality of this, I realize we could debate that ad nauseum. The national security implications. Let's say that by all accounts, I'm now going to paint a hypothetical. There is a war that the vast majority of people consider to be a just war, whatever that means, you know. So not a foreign policy, I don't know if it was you or a previous witness, misadventure, if you will. Mm-hmm. No declaration of war, National Guard unit somewhere possesses a capability that is needed overseas. So happens that governor of that state, for whatever reason, doesn't see the wisdom of the war, says, no, my folks aren't going. How do we get around the national security implications of that?
Well, first of all, I think this forces a dramatic rethinking of our National Guard policy. You know, one can argue about global warming, but one can't argue about the impacts of weather and the dramatic weather changes we face cyclically here in the United States in the last 2 years. The point is, shouldn't we be adequately funding, and as we are, most would argue, our national military? You know, the presence of jets, you know, as someone who lost friends on 9/11, the presence of jets here in the Commonwealth was a critically important response. But isn't that part of what the federal government should be directly funding? We've got this muddling of missions here. I quoted two very recent examples, the most, of course, importantly, being Katrina. The national security issue should be focused on the United States of America and its communities. That's the role of the National Guard. We have a well-developed military all over the world that should be focused on these quote-unquote national security solutions. Again, many of these National Guard units are focused, if you will, in terms of their skill sets on issues that affect their state. Tennessee, 700, anyone see the devastation in Tennessee recently? 700 Guards members left. Why are they being sent over? And some could argue, too, that the National Guard can be, frankly, a cheaper alternative. Staff the military adequately, have them respond federally to military situations, have the National Guard be prepared for issues here in the Commonwealth, where I live in the state of Rhode Island, or places like Tennessee, or some of the weather-impaired areas in this country. That's their job, not to be over there fighting proxy wars.
Well, I mean, I could spend a lot of time responding to that.
Mm-hmm, of course.
But what I would just keep it at this, is that good, bad, or indifferent, there is a current, you know, as it relates to troop readiness, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
There are unquestionably Guard units in America that fulfill a role, and maybe this is because of the blurring of the active component, the reserve, and the Guard post 9/11. Some would say before that. But again, I go back to, there is a need. Governor says no. It is a need that, for whatever reason, the active component cannot, or active or reserve component cannot fill. How do we get around that?
It's political. We have to be brave, because it's political expediency that's dictating that. It has nothing to do with the ability of the United States of America to garner the necessary resources to fund an adequate defense, and they already are. It's a question of what is politically expedient for an executive branch that has way too many powers. This whole notion that we could be fighting multiple wars, as we are in this world right now, and call them an exercise, that's fraud. And people are dying because of fraud. Taxpayer money is needlessly be wasted because of fraud, and people are dying in the United States because, I mean, look at the forest fires. How is it possible that we have natural disasters almost becoming a weekly news event, and we don't have adequate resources to react to them? Staff up the Guard for what they're intended, which is, and I'm not a fan of this word as a libertarian, but the defense of the homeland. And the defense of the homeland can incorporate so many things, weather-related. You know, we've got a National Guard that's being deployed. And by the way, I congratulate your references to the Posse Comitatus Act, because so many Americans don't even know what the Posse Comitatus law is in this country. We're facing that as the next level of expansion. The executive branch needs to be drawn back. Federal government needs to stick to the 10th Amendment of our federal Constitution, and states need to adequately fund and have the resources necessary to, quite frankly, save lives and do the amazing work they did, from everything from COVID to any one of the natural disasters that have happened in this country.
Questions? Anyone else? Sir, appreciate your advocacy on this. Thank you very much for testifying today.
And thank you for your hospitality. Again, it's outstanding.
Thank you very much.